My mother showed up at my building demanding that I let my brother see inside because he cried when passing by. I refused, and now I'm the villain of the family. I'm 31 years old now, and for the first time in my life, I understand what it means to breathe without weight in my chest. But if someone had told me 3 years ago that I would be living in a penthouse in the most expensive neighborhood in the city, completely isolated from my family, I would have thought it impossible. Back then, I still believed I could be loved by those who gave birth to me, if I just tried harder. My name is Helena, and this is the story of how my family taught me that sometimes the greatest victory is simply walking away. Growing up alongside my brother Marcos was like living in two parallel worlds within the same house. He was charismatic, popular, the kind of person who would enter a room and everyone would turn to look. I was the quiet one, who preferred to spend hours drawing in my room or reading about architecture instead of going to the parties he attended. My mother used to say that Marcos was the son of the family. I joked that made me the moon, but I stopped finding it funny when I realized that, unlike the moon, I was completely invisible. Marcos was always the golden child. When he wanted to play soccer, my parents bought him the most expensive cleats, tuition at private soccer schools, trips to championships in other cities. When I asked to take a technical drawing course, they said it was money thrown away on something that wouldn't amount to anything. He got a motorcycle at 18. I got a used bicycle that my dad found in a classified ad. At first, it wasn't jealousy. It was just confusion. I thought that if I tried hard enough, if I was good enough at something, they would finally see me. So I tried. I got excellent grades, won a full scholarship to a federal university for architecture, graduated among the best in my class. The first thing my mother said when I told her about my graduation was, "Great, now you can support yourself and stop giving us expenses." I wish I could say I exaggerated, but that tone became the soundtrack of my 20s. Every call home was a reminder that Marcos's achievements were cause for celebration, while mine were just obligations fulfilled. When he got engaged at 28, my parents organized a giant engagement party. I'm talking full buffet, expensive decoration, professional photographer, everything. When I told them I had been promoted to senior architect at the office where I worked, my father just said, "Don't get comfortable. Companies fire people all the time." The conversation about the wedding started a year later. Marcos wanted a dream ceremony, luxurious event space, designer wedding dress for the bride, over 200 guests. My parents wouldn't stop bragging about how proud they were to make that dream come true for him. I still remember the afternoon my mother called me and said, almost casually, "We're helping Marcos with some wedding costs." It's fair, right? You know how expensive weddings are these days. I didn't think much of it until I visited their house a few weeks later. My father was sitting at the kitchen table, calculator in hand, murmuring numbers quietly. There were receipts scattered everywhere. Buffet, flowers, live music, decoration. When I looked over his shoulder, I saw the total amount. 90,000 reais. I actually froze. "You're giving 90,000 for his wedding?" I asked, incredulous. My mother looked up from her coffee cup as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Of course. It's an important day for him. He deserves it." "And me?" I asked, half joking, half serious. My mother's smile disappeared. "Helena, you don't need help. You're single, focused on your career. You've always managed well on your own." That phrase, "you've always managed well on your own," stuck in my head like a thorn. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just sat there, feeling as if I had been silently erased from my own family's story. In the following months, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it didn't matter, that money wasn't love, that Marcos could have his fairy tale day. But when I saw the wedding photos afterward, resentment hit me like a punch in the stomach. There was my entire family smiling in expensive suits and dresses, the hall decorated with white arrangements and crystal chandeliers, my parents radiant as if they had married royalty. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner. My name wasn't even mentioned in the speeches. One of the bride's friends told me later that my parents said I couldn't go because I was too busy with work. I wasn't. I was at home, lying on the couch, realizing they hadn't even bothered to ask. For the first time, I stopped calling. I skipped Christmas that year, sent a simple "hope everyone is well" message, and focused on work. I poured every gram of frustration into my projects. Long nights, silent mornings, too much coffee. I climbed the career ladder faster than anyone expected. When the office was acquired by a large international construction company and I was promoted to partner, I received a bonus that I still find hard to believe. It wasn't generational wealth, but it was enough to change my life overnight. It was around that time that I met Rafael, a businessman in the real estate industry with sharp humor that made me forget my own bitterness. We connected instantly. For the first time, someone truly believed in me without conditions. We bought an apartment together first, small but ours, and when I told him about my family, he said something I'll never forget. You keep trying to buy their love, Helena. Maybe it's time to invest in yourself. That hit me hard. So that's what I did. I started my own architecture firm with a small team of people I trusted. Within a year, it exploded. Clients from all over the country. Contracts worth more than I had ever imagined. The kind of success my parents never believed I would achieve. Not that they were around to see it. I kept my distance. No visits. No calls. Just polite messages here and there when birthdays came around. Then, one afternoon 2 years after Marcos's wedding, I received a message from an unknown number. Hi Helena, it's Mom. Call me when you can. It's important. I stared at the screen for a while, debating whether I should respond. Something about the way it was written seemed strange to me, that forced politeness she used when she needed something. Against my better judgment, I called. Her voice came tense and trembling. Helena, did you buy a new apartment? I blinked. Yes, why? How did you know? There was a pause. Then a muffled sound, as if she was covering the phone, followed by a shaky sigh. Your brother passed by it. He said it's big, Helena. Very big. Is it true? Mom, what are you talking about? He said it's worth 3 million reis. Her voice cracked on the word millions. He called me crying, Helena. He kept asking, why does she have this? How is this fair? I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I could almost imagine the scene. Marcos's car slowing down in front of my building, his hand flying to his mouth as he realized that the sister he always looked down on now lived better than anyone in the family. My mother's tone changed, soft but loaded with accusation. You know, it's not nice to flaunt your money like that. Your brother is going through difficulties since the second child was born. Maybe you could help him a little. He's your only brother after all. And there it was. The familiar script, word for word. The same pattern I had heard all my life. Marcos gets the sympathy, and I get the guilt. Mom, I said slowly, you told me I didn't deserve help, remember? The silence on the other end was deafening. The truth about family betrayals is that they don't always come with screaming or drama. Sometimes they're silent. A lifetime of small rejections that accumulate until they form a wall. And on that day, standing at my apartment window, watching the sunset over the city, I realized I was finally on the other side of that wall. But I didn't hang up yet. Because deep down, I wanted to hear what she would say next. The part where the sense of entitlement would turn into demand. Where the mask would slip enough to reveal what my family really thought of me now. That's when she said it. The phrase that changed everything. And it was exactly there that everything started to crumble. My mother's voice trembled as if she had rehearsed this in front of the mirror. Helena, your brother is going through a very difficult time. His company went bankrupt a few months ago, and they can barely pay the bills. He's afraid of losing the house. I told him you might be able to. Stop. I didn't raise my voice, but it was enough to make her pause. You told him what, exactly? That you might be able to help, she said quickly, as if saying it fast made it harmless. You're doing so well, and he's your family. That's what family does. You need to understand how hard it's been for them, especially with 2 young children. So he passes by my building, calls you crying about how unfair it is, and your solution is for me to bail him out? He's emotionally distraught, Helena. Don't twist my words. That was the problem with my mother. She could always make me feel like I was the unreasonable person. Every time I tried to set a boundary, she found a way to turn it into guilt. Even through the phone, I could almost see her expression, that rehearsed frown she used when she wanted to seem disappointed instead of manipulative. You're so distant, she continued. We barely hear from you. You don't visit. Don't come to family parties. And now you're living in this huge apartment alone. What's the point of success if you can't share it with your family? That phrase, what's the point of success, hit me differently. Because she wasn't asking about happiness. She was talking about access. I could hear Marcos in the background now. His voice was muffled but loud enough for me to make out pieces. Tell her to stop acting like she's better than everyone. We're drowning and she's there in her fancy apartment doing nothing. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. In the following weeks, I tried to forget. But that call stayed under my skin like a splinter. Every few days, I received another message. Sometimes from my mother, sometimes from my father, occasionally even from Marcos. The tone was always the same. Polite at first, then loaded with guilt, then openly passive-aggressive. The first message from my father said, "Your brother is under a lot of pressure, daughter. Be the bigger person." The next one from my mother said, "You've changed, Helena. Money made you cold." And Marcos's? "I can't believe you'd watch your family sink like this. After everything our parents did for you. After everything they did for me." The irony almost made me laugh. Look, I never resented the money itself. Not really. I resented the message behind it. That my value was always conditional. That love came with a receipt and an asterisk. I built my life proving I could support myself. But somehow, that made me the villain. And it didn't stop there. A month later, I received an invitation in the mail. Thick ivory cardstock. Embossed gold edges. Fancy cursive letters. Little Helena's first birthday. Yeah. They named their daughter after me. At first, I thought it was some kind of peace offering. Maybe their way of extending an olive branch. I almost convinced myself to go. But when I called to ask about it, my mother answered instead of Marcos. "Oh, you got the invitation," she said cheerfully. Too cheerfully. "Marcos is so excited. It's going to be a special day. The whole family will be there." "Yeah, I saw. I was just wondering if there's a gift registry or something." There was a pause. "Oh, we don't want you to buy anything," she said, lowering her voice as if she were saying something delicate. Marcos actually thought that, instead of a gift, you could contribute something more meaningful. I already knew where this was going before she said it. He and Julia are still trying to recover from debts. And the children need a stable home. It would mean a lot if you could help them a little. You don't need to make a fuss. Just help discreetly. Help discreetly. As if the secrecy made it noble instead of manipulative. I didn't even bother asking how much. I just said I wouldn't be attending. That's when she exploded. "You're being cruel, Helena. You know how embarrassing this is for me. For your father? Everyone knows you're well off. And now you can't even show up because you're too proud to help your own brother." "I'm not proud," I said emotionlessly. "I'm done with this." And it was true. But the problem with boundaries is that people who benefited from crossing them don't respect them easily. 2 days before the party, my father called. The voice of reason, or at least that's how he liked to think of himself. "Daughter, I'm not taking sides here," he began, which was his way of saying he absolutely was. "But your brother is going through a hard time. He made mistakes, of course. But who hasn't? We all have to take care of each other." "I did that for 30 years, I said. "All I got was being ignored." He sighed. "When we helped Marcos, it wasn't to hurt you. It was because he needed more. You were always the independent one. We thought you didn't want our help." "Yeah," I said calmly. "And that assumption stayed pretty convenient for everyone, didn't it?" He had no answer for that. The day of the birthday party came and went. I spent the day hiking with Raphael. No phone, no family, no guilt. But when I got home that night, I had 21 missed calls. 7 from my mother, 8 from my father, and the rest from numbers I didn't recognize. There were messages too. Photos from the party. Comments like "We missed you, Aunt Helena," and one from Marcos that said, "You made everything awkward. Everyone asked why you didn't show up. Thanks for ruining my daughter's birthday." I didn't respond, but I could feel the anger simmering just below the surface. Not hot enough to explode, just enough to burn slowly. Weeks passed. The messages stopped. Silence, finally. I started to think maybe it was over. Then, in early spring, my phone buzzed while I was in a meeting. It was a voicemail from my mother. I almost ignored it, but something in her tone, the way she said my name, made me listen. "Helena. Daughter, I need you to call me back. Please. It's about Marcos. He's been so upset lately and, well, he might do something drastic if this continues. He feels like you hate him. Couldn't you just talk to him? Maybe invite him to your apartment. Show him you're not angry? Please. For me." That last part, for me, was a knife disguised as kindness. Raphael saw my face after I listened. "What happened?" he asked gently. "They're trying to use guilt as currency again," I said. "And they think I'll fall for it. Will you?" I shook my head. Not this time. But even as I said it, something in me felt uneasy, because I knew my mother. If emotional manipulation didn't work, she would escalate. And she did. A week later, she showed up at my building. Without warning. Standing there in a floral dress, as if it were a Sunday lunch. When I came down to meet her, she smiled as if nothing had happened. "I just wanted to see you," she said, peering behind me toward the building's lobby. "It's beautiful, Helena. You really did very well." "Thank you," I said cautiously. She waved, observing everything. The spacious entrance. The indoor garden. The uniformed doorman. The silent hum of success. Then her expression changed. She said softly. Marcos came by here the other day. He cried for hours. He kept saying he didn't understand how things ended up like this. How his sister got everything and he was left behind. I said nothing. My mother took a deep breath. You don't need to give him money. Just talk. Let him see the apartment inside. He feels like you're punishing him by leaving him out. I couldn't help myself. I laughed. He's the one who called me arrogant. Who told people I only made money because I got lucky with architecture. He can go to hell, Mom. That's not fair, she said, her voice rising. You think you're above us now. We raised you. We made sacrifices for you. That last phrase, "we raised you," was the last straw. No, I said, stepping closer. You raised Marcos. You tolerated me. She blinked, her face tightening with something between shock and offense. You're not serious. I mean every word. She left shortly after, but not before saying, You're going to regret this one day, Helena. Family is all you have. I watched her car disappear down the street, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No guilt. No sadness. Just silence. But that silence wouldn't last. Because a week later, I received an email. Not from my mother. Not from my father. From my sister-in-law, Marcos's wife. Julia. Subject. You owe us an explanation. And what was inside that email, the screenshots, the accusations, the audacity, would set everything in motion. That's when the real war began. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. 9:23 a.m., to be exact. I was finishing my coffee when I saw the subject line, You owe us an explanation. At first, I thought it was spam. The wording was so abrupt, so presumptuous, that it didn't cross my mind it could be from Julia, my sister-in-law. The same woman who once asked me to explain how to use Instagram because these internet things are too complicated. But then I noticed the name. Julia C. Her email address. Marcos's wife. The message started polite, almost formal. Helena, it said. I've been trying to reach you for weeks, but since you're ignoring everyone, I thought an email might get your attention. I don't want to start a fight, but this situation has gone too far. I frowned and scrolled down. Marcos has been crying every night. He feels betrayed and humiliated. Your parents are heartbroken. You act as if we did something unforgivable, but all we did was love you. Now you're there buying luxury apartments and living large while your family struggles. You could help, but you choose not to. That's cruel, Helena. There was more. Paragraph after paragraph of guilt-laden nonsense. But one sentence near the end made my stomach turn. If you don't want to help willingly, then at least don't make things worse by lying about us to people. Marcos told me what you said. I stared at that line for a long time, lying about them. I hadn't talked about my family to anyone except Raphael, and even then, I never exaggerated. So what exactly had Marcos told her? Then I got to the last paragraph. Also, we've seen what you're doing on social media. It's disgusting how you pretend to be generous and humble online when in reality you've abandoned your own blood. You made us look like idiots. Consider this your last warning before we take this further. I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. Take this further? What did that mean? Raphael came into the office just as I finished reading. Are you okay? He asked, noticing the expression on my face. I handed him my phone. He read silently for a minute, then said, This isn't just guilt anymore. This is a threat. Yeah, I murmured. And I have a bad feeling about what further means. I didn't have to wait long to find out. 2 days later, I woke up to a flood of notifications. Emails, messages, even some missed calls from colleagues. Something had gone wrong. My stomach sank as I opened one of the messages from a client. Hi Helena, saw some weird stuff on Facebook this morning. Is everything okay? Facebook? I barely used that. I hadn't posted anything in years. My hands were shaking as I opened the app. The first thing I saw was a post from Marcos. It was a long, emotional rant. Paragraphs of half-truths twisted into something ugly. I never thought I'd say this publicly, but I'm at my limit. My sister Helena, who grew up with all the privileges, has turned her back on her family. While we struggle to pay our bills, she flaunts her wealth and refuses to help, not even for my 2 young daughters. Money changed her. She forgot who helped her get where she is. I'm not asking for pity. I just want people to know what kind of person she's become. Attached were 3 photos. One of my building from the outside. One of my car in the garage. And this one made my blood run cold. A screenshot of an old message I had sent him years ago, when I was still working at my first job. It said, One day I'll earn enough to never have to ask anyone for anything again. Out of context, it looked arrogant. The post had over 200 likes and dozens of comments. Some sympathetic. some openly cruel. Wow. Money really changes people. Can't believe family would do this. I hope karma gets her. I just sat there, staring at the screen, my throat tight. Raphael put his hand on my shoulder. Helena, we can report this. You don't need to respond. But that wasn't the worst part. Because that afternoon, I discovered he hadn't stopped there. Marcos had sent an email to my company, to my partners, to clients. Using his personal account, he had written that I was under investigation for financial misconduct and that people should be careful doing business with me. He even included fake screenshots of supposed transactions from my company account. Numbers he clearly made up, but convincing enough at first glance to cause damage. One of my junior partners called me panicking. Helena, what is this? Did something happen? We're getting calls from clients asking if we're being sued. I spent the next 48 hours putting out fires, calling lawyers, drafting statements, explaining that none of it was true. Fortunately, I had records, clean audits, bank statements, proof of every transaction. But it didn't matter. The damage to my reputation had already begun. This felt personal in a way I'd never experienced before. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about humiliation. And when I thought it couldn't get worse, my mother called. She didn't even sound angry, just exhausted. Helena, I warned you this would happen if you kept ignoring your brother. You warned me. I exploded. He publicly accused me of financial crimes, Mom. He's trying to destroy my company. He's hurt, my mother said softly. You pushed him too far. I laughed bitterly. So this is my fault now? Her silence said everything. Something in me cracked at that moment. All those years being the quiet one. The peacemaker. The one who swallowed her pride just to keep the peace. Everything exploded. You know what, Mom? I used to think you didn't understand what you were doing. But now I see. You taught him this. You taught him he can do anything, say anything, and you'll always defend him. Congratulations. You raised a manipulator. She gasped as if I had hit her. Don't you dare talk about my son like that. Your son, I said calmly. I stopped being your daughter a long time ago. I hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory passed through my mind. Every time I was dismissed, ridiculed, or made to feel small. And now, when I had finally built something of my own, they were trying to destroy it. But it wasn't just emotional anymore. The next morning, I received an alert from my accountant. Someone had tried to access my company's financial accounts using a password reset request. Twice. The IP address traced back to a small town. The same one where my parents and Marcos lived. I sat there staring at the email for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. The kind of cold, deliberate anger that doesn't explode. It calculates. When Raphael came downstairs, I was already at my laptop typing. I'm done being nice, I said. He didn't stop me. Just nodded. Then do it right. No yelling. No emotion. Just facts. And that's exactly what I did. I started gathering evidence. Screenshots of every message. Every false claim. Every financial attempt. I documented company statements, tracked IP logs, contacted my lawyer, and even called a cybersecurity investigator. The results? Let's just say Marcos and Julia were very careless. They had used their home Wi-Fi for everything, including the fake emails. Every message they sent pretending to be anonymous led directly to their address. Still, I didn't act immediately. I wanted to make sure that when I struck, it would be irreversible. And then came the final straw. I was in a video conference with an international client when she said, almost hesitantly, Helena, I hate to bring this up, but one of your relatives contacted our company directly. Said you've been lying about your credentials. My stomach dropped. Who? She hesitated. She introduced herself as Julia. Said she was your sister-in-law. That was it. She had crossed the line from petty family drama to complete sabotage. I ended the call, closed my laptop, and just sat there for a while, letting the silence settle around me. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm, the world at peace, completely oblivious to the storm forming inside me. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. She wants to ruin my life? I said. Fine. Let's see how she likes it when the truth comes out. Raphael didn't even ask what I meant. He just said, so it's time. Because at that moment, I already knew how to end this. Not with anger, not with screaming, but with proof. Real, undeniable proof that would turn the entire family against them and expose exactly what kind of people they had become. I just needed one last thing before pulling the trigger. And that arrived a few days later, in the form of an unexpected letter that landed in my mailbox. The return address? My parents' house. The sender? My father. Inside was something that made my hands go cold. Something I didn't expect to see in 1,000 years. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about Marcos anymore. It was about all of them. The envelope was thick, heavier than normal mail. My father's handwriting was careful, deliberate, the kind he used when he wanted to seem calm, even when he wasn't. I sat at the kitchen island, the morning sun filtering through the blinds, just staring at it for a moment before opening. Something about that letter felt final. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice, and a printed document underneath. The first page was written in my father's voice, measured, diplomatic, and dripping with the kind of false civility that always made me uneasy. Helena, your mother and I have talked a lot about everything that's happened. We're worried about how things are spiraling. We can't keep pretending this is just a misunderstanding between siblings. You've cut off communication, isolated yourself, and now hired lawyers to threaten your own family. This isn't how we raised you. We've decided it's best to formally separate ourselves from any business of yours or financial matters. Attached is a statement we'll be filing at the notary's office to legally remove our names from any shared property rights or trust funds. We hope that one day you'll come to your senses and realize that family means more than money. Dad. For a moment, I didn't understand. Shared property rights? Trust funds? I didn't share anything with them, not legally. Then I looked at the second document and felt my chest tighten. It was a formal withdrawal statement from a family trust fund, one I didn't even know existed. I read it 3 times, trying to process what it meant. My father had listed my name alongside Marcos's, theirs, and something called Silva Family Fund, apparently established 20 years ago. My name appeared as a beneficiary, but I had never seen or heard of this in my life. When Raphael came into the kitchen, I must have looked pale because he immediately said, "What happened?" I handed him the papers. He read slowly, his brow furrowing. "Wait, you didn't know about this?" I shook my head. Never even heard of it. We did some digging. Turns out, when my grandparents passed away, they left a small inheritance. Nothing massive, but enough to establish a family trust fund. My parents were the executors. Marcos and I were the named beneficiaries. But over the years, they had quietly restructured everything, putting Marcos in control of the assets and redirecting funds for his expenses, wedding costs, mortgage help, emergency support. Essentially, my parents had been dipping into what was partially mine to finance my brother's lifestyle, and the letter wasn't them separating from me. It was them covering their own tracks. I sat there in silence for a long time, not even angry, just empty. Because it hit me, they had been using my name all along, probably to make the fund look legitimate for tax purposes. They benefited from it, and now, when things got complicated, they were erasing me as if I never existed. That was the moment everything broke. That night, I barely slept. I walked through the house in silence, that letter replaying in my head like a bad song. Every word, every phrase seemed like confirmation of something I had always suspected but never wanted to admit, that my family never saw me as part of them. Just as a tool. The next morning, I drove aimlessly. I didn't even know where I was going until I ended up parked at a lookout on the coast, the kind of place I used to go when I needed to think. The waves were violent that day, crashing hard against the rocks below, the sky cloudy and gray. I sat there for hours, just letting the world move without me. At one point, my phone buzzed. Another message from my mother. "Please don't make things worse, Helena. You've already caused enough damage." No apology. No acknowledgement of what they had done. Just guilt. That's when I realized something quietly, painfully simple. They were never going to understand. I could present proof, logic, evidence, and they would still twist everything until I was the villain. So I decided to stop explaining. For the next few weeks, I disconnected. No calls, no emails, no business meetings. My partners handled most of the work while I floated in a fog of exhaustion. Raphael tried to help. He would sit beside me in the afternoons, in silence, just holding my hand. But even he couldn't fully reach me. I felt like a ghost in my own life. Then one night, as I sat on the back terrace, watching the city lights below, he came out with 2 cups of coffee and said calmly, "You can't let them keep this power over you." I didn't respond. "You keep thinking that closure means them admitting they were wrong," he said. "They won't admit it. Some people would rather rewrite history than face it." His words hung in the air. He was right. I was waiting for something that would never come. For them to see me, to tell me, "We were wrong. You mattered too." But all I got was a letter cutting me out of my own bloodline. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them anymore. I was going to walk away, completely. The next morning, I called my lawyer and told him to proceed with a complete review of the trust fund. Not to contest it. Not to claim it. Just to have a record. Proof. Something that couldn't be erased or twisted later. Then I called my accountant and started the process of moving every financial tie out of reach. New accounts. New layers of security. Even a new company structure under a different name. By the end of that week, there wasn't a single connection between me and my family that could be exploited. And yet, even as I cut those ties, the sadness persisted. I had lost something deeper than money. I had lost the illusion of family. I remember one night in particular. Early summer. The house silent. The air heavy with the smell of rain. I found myself scrolling through old photos. Marcos and me as children, building pillow forts in the living room. My mother smiling at us from behind the camera. My father grilling in the background. It almost seemed real, that image of a happy family. But memories are deceptive. The mind edits them gently. I closed the laptop and whispered, "That version is gone." After that, something changed in me. I started working again. Not with obsession, but with purpose. I built, quietly, methodically. I didn't talk about revenge. I didn't vent or explode. I just focused. Raphael once asked me what I was planning, and I told him the truth. Nothing dramatic. Just peace. But if the truth ever comes out, and it will, I want to be ready. Months passed. The calls decreased, then stopped. The Facebook posts were deleted. Probably because the lawyer's letter finally reached them. I started to feel human again. I traveled. I invested. I stayed completely off social media. But peace is a fragile thing. One afternoon, about 6 months later, I received an email from an old family friend. Donna Carmam, a neighbor from our old street. She always liked me. Treated me like the daughter she never had. Her message was simple. "Helena, dear, I hope you're well. I thought you should know. Your parents are selling the house. Marcos and Julia are going to live with them for now. They mentioned something about starting over after some financial problems. It seems serious. Selling the house. Starting over." I closed the laptop and sat there in silence. That's when it hit me. The money from the fund had run out. Every cent. They had drained it to support Marcos's lifestyle until it collapsed under its own weight. And now, for the first time, they were facing consequences. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part, the smaller and more tired one, felt sorry for them. But pity has a short half-life. Because a week later, I discovered something that changed everything again. I was shopping when I stopped by the bank to take care of some paperwork for my new business account. The manager, a nice woman who had been helping me for years, called me aside. "Hi, Helena," she said. "Just a quick heads up, your old joint account with your parents was accessed recently. There was an attempt to withdraw funds, but it was automatically frozen since it was marked as inactive." I blinked. "Wait, what joint account?" She turned the computer screen toward me and showed me. Sure enough, there it was. An account created when I was 17 years old. My father must have opened it back then for college savings or something like that. They had left my name on it as a formality, and I had forgotten it even existed. But it wasn't empty. There were a few thousand reis in there, probably leftovers from something they never closed properly. "Good thing we caught it," the manager said. "Otherwise, that money would have been gone." I thanked her, left the bank, and sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. It was such a small thing. A forgotten account. A frozen withdrawal. But to me, it said everything. Even after everything they had done, even after cutting me off, they were still trying to take whatever little remained with my name on it. And that's when I realized something quietly, almost peacefully. I was done feeling sorry for them. Because people like that don't learn through kindness or guilt. They only understand consequence. So I started planning. Not out of anger, but precision. Not for money. Not for revenge in the petty sense. For truth. Because if my family was going to destroy my name, I was going to make sure the world knew exactly who they were first. And soon enough, I would have the perfect opportunity to do that. One that would come knocking on its own. I just didn't know yet that when it came, it would drag every secret they ever buried into the light. The turning point didn't come with fireworks or some cinematic moment of triumph. It came quietly on a gray Tuesday morning when fog hung low and I was having coffee in the same kitchen where I once opened my father's letter. For the first time in months, I felt still. The kind of stillness that comes after a long storm, when the thunder finally gives up and all that's left is the hum of the world returning to normal. I had spent months untangling my life from my family's chaos. It was like pulling weeds from a garden. You think you got them all, and then another root appears. But with each tie cut, I felt lighter. My lawyer finalized the paperwork, confirming I was no longer associated with the Silva family fund. My accountant had secured my assets in trusts that only I controlled. Every legal and financial vulnerability was locked down tight. But it wasn't that which made life start to bloom again. It was the feeling of space. Emotional space. The first few weeks after cutting ties felt strange. Like walking out of a noisy room and realizing how loud silence is. I didn't know who I was without the background noise of guilt and obligation. For most of my life, I had been reacting, trying to prove something to people who didn't care. Now, for the first time, I was building for myself. Raphael noticed the change before I did. One morning, he looked up from his laptop and said, "You're different lately." Different how? You're not checking your phone every 5 minutes waiting for another message from them. I smiled slightly. I guess I ran out of reasons to. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. So what now? The truth was I didn't know. But I had ideas. Ambitions I had buried under years of trying to stay small. For months, investors had been approaching me wanting to expand my architecture firm into something bigger. A global platform for sustainable projects. I had always said no, mainly because the idea of managing that scale terrified me. But now, the fear seemed smaller than regret. So I said yes. The next year became a blur of movement. I flew from city to city, built partnerships, hired new teams, and learned to lead in ways I was never taught. I was careful with everything. No shortcuts. No inflated promises. No fake it till you make it. I had seen up close what fakeness looked like. I didn't want to be part of that. There were setbacks, of course. Bad hires. Long nights. Burnout. But the difference was that this time, I wasn't doing it to prove something to anyone. I was doing it because I believed in it. And that belief, I discovered, was contagious. Within 18 months, our company had grown from a small consulting office to a full-service architecture firm with global contracts. Design magazines started calling, and interviews followed. I avoided talking about my past. I kept my answers focused on perseverance, discipline, teamwork. But people who had known me for years could sense it. This wasn't just professional growth. It was personal evolution. The first time I saw my name in an article in Architecture and Urbanism, Raphael printed it out and stuck it on the fridge like a proud parent. "For the archives," he said with a smile. I laughed. "You act like I won a Nobel Prize." "You kind of did," he joked. Just the architecture version. Life started to feel full again. Overseas trips. New friends. Long dinners that didn't end in arguments. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying a version of myself that needed defending. And yet, in the quiet moments, when I came home late and saw the city lights twinkling outside the window, there was still that faint ache. The ache of knowing my family had no idea who I had become. Or worse, that they knew and couldn't stand it. I try not to dwell on it. But the universe has a way of testing how well you've really moved on. It started with a voicemail. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it until curiosity got stronger. The voice was formal, unfamiliar. "Hello, Miss Silva. This is Ricardo Mendez, probate attorney representing the late Mr. and Mrs. Andrade. I believe you were listed as a contact for their community aid fund. Please return my call when you can." The Andrades were a retired couple who lived 2 streets down from my childhood home. They were kind people, always inviting neighborhood kids for lemonade on the porch. They always treated me well, even when my parents didn't. I hadn't spoken to them in years. When I returned the lawyer's call, he explained that the Andrades had passed away a few months earlier and left a donation, a scholarship fund for underprivileged students interested in architecture. "Your name came up," he said, "because they mentioned how you used to help them with their computer for free when you were a teenager. They were very fond of you." I was quiet for a moment. "What do you need from me?" "They would like you to oversee the fund. It's not large, but they trusted you to manage it honestly." I said yes. Something about that request, simple, generous, human, reminded me of who I used to be before all the noise. So I took the project seriously. I built an online platform for the scholarship, automated the application system, and personally reviewed the first batch of applicants. Within months, the program had funded its first 5 students. One of them wrote me a letter that said, "Thank you for believing in people you don't even know." That single sentence hit harder than any award. From there, things accelerated. The scholarship gained traction, local media covered it, and soon we were collaborating with universities. It became a movement. Small at first, but growing fast. People started associating my name not just with business, but with opportunity. That's when the invitations started coming. Architecture conferences, leadership panels, charity galas. I accepted some, mostly out of curiosity. One night, at a business event in Sao Paulo, a journalist asked during a Q&A session, "What motivates you now that you've achieved success?" I thought for a moment before responding. Freedom. The kind that comes from knowing no one owns a piece of you anymore. It wasn't rehearsed. It just came out naturally. But judging by the reaction, it resonated. That quote ended up circulating online. People reposted, reworded, shared it. It became one of those motivational phrases you see on LinkedIn with someone's grayscale photo behind it. And while I didn't care much about internet fame, it served an unintentional purpose. It reached them. I didn't know until months later. I was in Sao Paulo wrapping up a meeting when Raphael called. "You're not going to believe this," he said, half amused, half cautious. "Your mother tried to reach out again." I froze. "What?" She sent a handwritten letter to the office. Addressed him as Helena Silva, founder and CEO. I think she saw the articles. I let out a slow breath. "What did it say?" Raphael hesitated. "I didn't open it. It's on your desk." When I got back, the envelope was there neatly beside my computer. Cream paper, elegant cursive handwriting. My mother's penmanship. I didn't open it immediately. I just stared at it, remembering the last time she wrote to me. The last time her words tore through me. Eventually, I unfolded it. "Helena, we saw you on TV. Your father and I are proud of what you've accomplished, even if we don't always understand your choices. I know we've had our differences, but maybe it's time to let the past be the past. We're not getting any younger, and Marcos could really use his sister right now. Things haven't been easy for him. Maybe we could have dinner sometime and talk. Families should stay together." There it was again. The same pattern, wrapped in politeness, baited with guilt. They hadn't changed. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted proximity to success. That realization didn't hurt this time. It just confirmed what I already knew. I folded the letter back and put it in a drawer. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. A week later, the company hosted a conference in Belo Horizonte. Over 300 people attended. Architects, investors, students, journalists. I gave a keynote speech about resilience and reinvention. Midway through, I looked out at the audience and spotted a young woman near the back, taking notes furiously. She reminded me of myself at 20. Nervous, eager, underestimated. After the talk, she came up to me. "I just wanted to say I read that article about you. My family doesn't really support what I'm doing either. Hearing your story helped." That was the moment I realized something important. I didn't need my old family anymore. I had built a new one. One made of people who believed in me, who grew with me, who didn't measure my worth by how much I gave them. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Still, the story wasn't over. Because not long after that conference, just when everything was falling into place, I received another call. This time, from an unknown number with a familiar area code. I answered, expecting maybe a journalist or client. Instead, a quiet voice said, "Helena? It's Julia." I froze. She sounded different. Defeated. "I know you don't want to hear from me," she said. "But you need to know what's happening. It's about Marcos and your parents." Her next words made my heart sink. Because as much as I had moved on, I wasn't ready for what she was about to tell me. And that one call would change everything again. Julia's voice trembled on the line. The sound of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. "They're in trouble, Helena. Serious trouble." I leaned back in my chair, my tone calm but cautious. "Define serious trouble." She hesitated. "The fund. It's gone. Completely gone. Your father had been taking loans against it for years. And the last investment he made tanked. Some real estate scheme. They owe almost 700,000 reais now. The house sale barely covered the mortgage." I didn't respond immediately. I had suspected the fund was dry. But hearing it confirmed was different. There was a hollow satisfaction to it. Like watching a fire finally consume itself. Julia continued, her voice lower now. "They thought they could fix it by refinancing through a contact. Someone they met through an old business friend of Marcos's. But apparently, the deal was fraudulent. They lost everything. They might face charges if they can't pay it back." I closed my eyes. "And you're telling me this why?" She let out a shaky breath. "Because they're desperate. And your mother. She's saying things. About you. That you owe them. That you're the reason they're in this mess. Because you turned your back on family. She's talking about making this public again, Helena. But this time, not just online. She's talking to reporters. That got my attention. Reporters? I repeated slowly. Yeah. Some local outlet that does those human interest stories. She wants to set the record straight. Make it look like you built your fortune by exploiting your family's fund. I told her it was insane. But she won't listen. She keeps saying she has proof. Bank statements. Emails. Old documents. She's convinced she can make it look like you stole from them. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own breathing. It wasn't anger that hit me. It was clarity. Cold, precise clarity. Julia, I said calmly. Thank you for telling me. She sighed. I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing it because Marcos is scared. I think he finally realized how far this has gone. But your parents, especially your mother. She won't stop until she destroys you. Then maybe it's time I stop letting her try. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. My mind methodically piecing together everything I had gathered over the past 2 years. Emails. Screenshots. Messages. Financial records. I had enough evidence to prove my innocence 10 times over. But that wasn't enough anymore. This wasn't about defending myself. It was about ending the narrative permanently. Raphael came into my office a few minutes later, coffee in hand. He didn't need to ask. He could read everything in my expression. What did they do now? They're trying to frame me, I said simply. His eyebrows rose, but he didn't look surprised. So it's time to tell the truth. I nodded. All of it. The next week, I set everything in motion. I contacted my company's PR team. Not to bury the story, but to prepare for it. If my family wanted to make this public, I would meet them there. Except this time, I would control the story. But I didn't stop there. I called my lawyer and authorized a complete audit of the Silva family fund. We already had documentation, but I wanted an official, certified report. I wanted every transaction traced, every cent that had been diverted, every expense labeled under Marcos support. If they wanted to drag me into the spotlight, I was bringing receipts. 2 weeks later, the audit was complete. The findings were brutal. My name had been used dozens of times to authorize disbursements I never knew about. My parents had forged digital consent forms using my outdated electronic signature template from when I worked for them years ago. They had effectively stolen from me under my own name. And now, facing financial ruin, they were about to publicly accuse me of doing exactly that. So I waited. 3 days later, it happened. An article appeared in the regional journal with the headline, "Architecture CEO's Family Alleges Betrayal. She Built Her Empire with Our Money." The piece was full of emotional quotes from my mother and father. Marcos wasn't quoted, probably too embarrassed or scared to add his name. The article painted them as sympathetic, struggling parents, abandoned by a greedy daughter. What they didn't know was that I was waiting for it. That night, my statement was ready. Calm, measured, professional. My PR team launched it across all channels with supporting documents. Not opinion. Just facts. All financial activities linked to the Silva family fund were conducted without my consent. I have cooperated fully with authorities and submitted verified audits proving misuse of my name and assets by other parties. I hope those involved receive the help they need. I will make no further comments. But there was one more thing. Along with that statement, I uploaded a series of public documents to a legal repository shared with journalists, investigators, and the public. Redacted for privacy, but comprehensive. The audit. The forged electronic signatures. The transaction records. Every piece of evidence showing exactly how the money had been drained. And within hours, the narrative flipped. The same outlet that published the hit piece published an update. New evidence contradicts Silva family claims. Audit suggests fraudulent use of CEO's identity. By the next morning, the news had spread beyond local papers. National outlets picked up the story. Financial blogs, architecture sites, even some podcasts about business ethics. The story was no longer about me being a villain. It was about a family scandal. A betrayal that cut the other way. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post a victory tweet or make statements. I let the truth speak for itself. But the real moment of poetic justice came a few days later, when my lawyer forwarded me a message from the state public prosecutor's office. They were launching an investigation into misuse of trust funds and identity fraud. The potential defendants? My parents. It wasn't revenge I felt then. It was liberation. Still, I didn't want them destroyed. I didn't want prison or public humiliation. What I wanted was for the world to finally see the truth. And for them to face it. So I made one final move. Through a mutual contact at the Tribune, I arranged an interview. Not about my family, but about resilience. We talked about integrity, about choosing peace over retaliation, about what happens when you finally stop seeking approval. The interviewer asked if my upbringing had influenced who I became. I smiled and said, in every possible way. Sometimes the best lessons come from the worst teachers. It was subtle, but everyone who needed to understand understood. After that, the noise died down. My parents' accusations withered under legal scrutiny. Their assets were temporarily seized, pending investigation. Marcos moved out of their house, filing for separation from Julia a few months later. I didn't interfere. I didn't reach out. I had done enough. But one night, as the sun set behind the hills, I found myself standing in the same spot on my terrace where I had once read my father's letter. I thought about everything. The years of silence. The betrayal. The slow unraveling of a family that confused control with love. And I realized something. I hadn't just survived them. I had outgrown them. The next morning brought one last call. From my lawyer. Can we ensure the trust fund investigation remains on public record? I asked. He hesitated. Are you sure? Most people want to keep this private. I want transparency, I said. Let it stand as a record. For anyone who tries to twist the story again. He paused, then said quietly, understood. That was it. My silent revenge. No screaming. No movie-worthy revenge plot. Just the truth, exposed for the world to see. And yet, deep down, I knew the consequences hadn't even really begun. Because people like my parents don't just crumble overnight. They fight back, even when there's nothing left to fight for. And when the final confrontation came, it wouldn't be through lawyers or newspaper articles. It would be face-to-face. And I had the feeling it was coming soon. It happened 6 months later, on an ordinary morning that didn't feel like the end of anything. The air was cool, the sky partly cloudy, and I was walking through the atrium of my office building when reception called to tell me someone was waiting in the lobby. When I came down, it was them. My parents. They looked smaller somehow, as if time had compressed them. My father's once proud shoulders were slouched, his hair thin and gray. My mother clutched her purse like a shield, her eyes scanning the lobby, terrified someone might recognize her. They both stood when I approached, as if instinctively still trying to perform dignity, even now. Helena, my mother said first. Her voice was low, trembling, like a violin that had lost its tuning. We just wanted to talk. I said nothing, just pointed to a private meeting room. Inside, the silence felt heavy, as if we were sitting inside the echo of everything that had happened. My father cleared his throat. You made your point. I raised an eyebrow. My point. You embarrassed us, he said, his tone brittle. Dragged our name through the mud. We can't go anywhere without people whispering. Do you have any idea what that's like? I let out a small, incredulous laugh. You accused me of theft and fraud in the press. Forged my name on financial documents. And you're worried about whispers. My mother flinched. We were desperate, she said softly. We didn't know what else to do. You wouldn't talk to us and Marcos. Marcos is grown. Marcos is grown, I interrupted. He made his choices. He always has. That shut him up. For a long time, no one said a word. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. Finally, my mother spoke again, tears threatening to fall. We've lost everything, Helena. The house. The savings. Your father's retirement is gone. We don't even know where we'll be living next month. I watched her carefully. The guilt. The desperation. It was all there. But underneath, I could still see the flicker of expectation. That little spark that said she still thought I might save them. Because I always had. But not anymore. I'm sorry you're going through this, I said calmly. I really am. But I'm not the solution. Her lip trembled. You would really let your own parents end up on the street? I took a deep breath. You let your own daughter drown for 30 years because her pain didn't fit your narrative. I begged for your love. For approval. For respect. And you gave me conditions. You used my name when it was convenient, and erased me when it wasn't. So yes, I'm done saving people who never wanted me to exist on my own terms. She stared at me, speechless. My father looked at the table, his jaw working as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. I stood up. There's a fund, I said finally, for families who need emergency housing. I'll make a donation in your name. You can apply if you qualify. My father's head snapped up. You think we're charity? I met his gaze evenly. I think it's all that's left. He stood too, his face red, trembling with a mixture of anger and shame. "You're going to regret this," he hissed. "One day you'll realize that money can't fill the hole where family should be." I tilted my head. "You're right. But peace can." He froze at that. My mother started crying softly as I walked to the door. I paused, just for a second, long enough to say what I had wanted to say my whole life. "I forgive you," I said softly. "But that doesn't mean I'll let you hurt me again." And then I left. They didn't follow me. A week later, I learned through a mutual contact that they had moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The investigation was closed without charges, just a permanent mark on their records and the loss of everything they had left. Marcos filed for bankruptcy, moved to another state, and started working again. I never reached out, and he never called. The noise finally stopped. Months passed. Seasons changed. The world moved on, and so did I. One night, I found myself sitting on the terrace again. The same place where it had all begun, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The air was golden, the silence deep. Raphael came out and handed me a glass of wine, settling beside me. "Do you think about them sometimes?" he asked gently. "Sometimes," I said. "But not with anger anymore. Just distance." He nodded. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. For a moment, I thought about my younger self. The girl who once believed that love had to be earned, who thought silence was safety. I wanted to tell her that peace doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. As the last light faded, I raised my glass slightly and whispered, half to myself, a toast to letting go. And for the first time in my life, I meant it truly. In the months that followed, life flourished in ways I had never imagined. The architecture firm expanded to 3 countries. The scholarship grew, funding over 50 students. I received invitations to speak at universities about leadership and resilience. But the real victory wasn't in the numbers or awards. It was in the small things. Waking up without that weight in my chest. Laughing without guilt. Building relationships based on mutual respect instead of obligation. Raphael and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony on a beach at sunset. Just close friends and colleagues. People who genuinely cared. No one from my family was invited. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a choice. During the vows, when he held my hands and said, "You're the bravest person I know," I felt tears in my eyes. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. For having found someone who saw me. Really saw me. That night, dancing under the stars with the sound of waves in the background, I realized something profound. I hadn't just survived my family. I had built a life so beautiful that their pain couldn't reach me anymore. 2 years passed since that last conversation with my parents. Occasionally, I heard news through mutual acquaintances. They were still in the small apartment. My father got a part-time job at a construction supply store. My mother worked as a receptionist at a clinic. Marcos had reconciled with Julia and they were rebuilding, slowly. Part of me expected to feel satisfaction at their fall. But all I felt was nothing. Neither joy nor sadness. Just the quiet acceptance that it wasn't my problem anymore. One afternoon, while organizing papers in my office, I found my mother's last letter. The one she had sent asking to have dinner. I held it for a moment, rereading the words. Families should stay together. I smiled sadly, because she was right, in a way. Families should stay together. But real family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up, who supports, who loves you without conditions. And in that sense, I had more family than I ever had. I put the letter back in the drawer, not to keep it with anger, but as a reminder. A reminder of how far I had come, of how much strength I had found in the simple act of walking away. That night, Raphael and I sat on the terrace with coffee, watching the city light up below us. The air was warm, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly. "Cutting ties completely?" I thought for a long moment. "No," I said finally. "I regret not doing it sooner." He nodded, understanding. "You know what's funny?" I continued. "I spent so much time trying to earn their love, thinking that if I was good enough, smart enough, successful enough, they would finally see me. But the truth is some people will never see you. Not because you're not worthy, but because they chose not to look. And now," I smiled. "Now I choose who stays in my line of sight." We sat in silence for a while, just existing in that perfect moment. I realized that's what peace was about. Not grand gestures or dramatic revenge. Just the ability to sit quietly in your own life and feel at home. A few months later, I received an unexpected letter. Not from my parents, but from Marcos. It was short, handwritten, the penmanship irregular, as if he had rewritten it several times. Helena, I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't even expect you to read it. But I need to say it. You were right. About everything. I spent years blaming you for being successful when I should have been dealing with my own failures. Our parents raised us believing that love was a competition, and I fought to win instead of realizing the whole game was broken. I'm sorry for what I did. For the lies, the accusations, the pain. You deserved better. You always deserved better. I hope you found the peace you were looking for. Marcos. I read the letter 3 times, feeling complex emotions stir inside me. Anger, sadness, and strangely, a flicker of compassion. I didn't respond, but I also didn't throw it away. I put it in a box with other pieces of my past. Not to revisit, but to remember. To remember where I came from and how far I had traveled. 5 years passed since I cut ties with my family. 5 years of building, growing, and finally learning what it means to live without the weight of unrealistic expectations. The architecture firm now had offices in 7 countries. The scholarship had funded over 200 students. I wrote a book about leadership and resilience that became a bestseller. But none of that compared to the moment I held my newborn daughter in my arms. I looked at that perfect little face and made a promise. She would never feel invisible. Never question whether she was loved. Never have to earn my affection. Raphael was beside me, his eyes wet. What should we name her? I thought for a moment, then smiled. Sophia. It means wisdom. Perfect, he whispered. As I held Sophia, I felt something settle inside me. The last piece of pain dissolving. Because I realized, the best kind of revenge isn't destruction. It's creating something so beautiful, so full of love, that the shadows of the past can't reach it anymore. My family had taught me how not to love. And in response, I built an entire life dedicated to doing the opposite. Years later, on a sunny afternoon, Sophia came running up to me with an old photo she had found in a box. Mommy, who are these people? I looked at the photo. It was from my childhood. Marcos and I building a pillow fort. My parents in the background, smiling. For a moment, I felt that familiar ache. But it passed quickly, like a cloud crossing the sun. They're people I knew a long time ago, I said gently. People who were part of a different version of my life. Do you still see them? No, sweetheart. And that's okay. Sophia nodded, already losing interest and running back to play. I looked at the photo one more time before putting it back. There was no bitterness, just acceptance. Because the truth was this, some stories don't have happy endings with all the characters. Some stories end with you realizing you're better off without certain people in it. And that wasn't tragic. It was liberating. That night, after Sophia was asleep, I found myself once again on that familiar terrace, the same place where it had all begun, where I once stood broken-hearted, trying to understand how my own family could make me feel so small. But now, standing there under the stars, I felt something different. Gratitude. Gratitude for having found enough strength to walk away, for having built a life on my own terms, for having learned that peace doesn't come from being loved by everyone, but from loving yourself enough to know when to leave. Raphael came out and hugged me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. How far I've come, I said softly. And how grateful I am for every difficult step that brought me here. He kissed my shoulder. You built something beautiful, Helena. Not just the business or the scholarship, but this. He gestured to the house, to where our daughter slept peacefully. A life full of real love. Tears stung my eyes. Because he was right. I hadn't just survived my family. I had transcended everything they represented. I had broken the cycle. Created something new. Something healthy. And in the end, that was the best revenge of all. Not destruction, but creation. Not hate, but healing. Not proving they were wrong about me, but proving to myself that I was always enough. As the stars twinkled above and the city hummed softly below, I whispered to the night, thank you. Thank you for the pain that taught me strength. For the rejection that taught me self-sufficiency. For the betrayal that taught me discernment. And thank you for finally learning to let go. Because in the end, the story of my life wasn't about the family I lost. It was about the family I chose. And about the woman I became when I stopped trying to be who they wanted and started being who I was always meant to be. Free.